Good evening, and welcome to the Foreign Correspondents Club of Thailand. I'm Marwan Makanmaka, correspondent for the Nikkei Asian Review and former FCCT president. It's a pleasure to see so many of you here for this event, and I'm sure we have more people who will be following our program on our online live feed. Before we begin with today's program, happening against a background of clearly momentous political developments, just want to make a few announcements. If there are people who would like to join the FCCT here, and even those people online following us from afar, please do so, because the club needs your membership. The club is a business entity in a sense, and it needs people to attend events and be members and continue its role as a pillar, a significant pillar of Bangkok and I dare say Thailand's intellectual life. So that's why we have events like this, and we have planned quite a few more to test the political waters in Thailand, and many Thais recognize the FCCT as still one of those last bastions of free speech and open discussion. So membership is what we thrive on, and we need you. In terms of events in our calendar, as a result of what we have witnessed across Thailand universities, high schools, and certainly at Democracy Monument, the club has put together a panel discussion tomorrow to look at the student-led protests and Thai politics in 2020, where it is heading. So if you have not booked a spot, I suggest you do so, because we're trying to ensure we strike a balance between a packed house and COVID social distancing. And then on Friday, we have our piano night. We have a pianist who plays and gets people involved in song, and our manager, Richard, is quite keen that I plug this event so that we have quite a number of members and non-members and families who come for the program. Today's event, today's panel discussion, is timely because what we are seeing today on the streets certainly raises important questions like what's wrong with Thailand's education system, which our distinguished panelists will address. It's often, I always use a few facts to explain to people who ask me, what do you think of Thailand's education system? And I always say in the last 21 years, Thailand has had 21 education ministers. That's one education minister on average every year. And that tells you about the country's education system being in a state of flux. Some of you who were here soon after the coup of 2014 may remember in September of that year, the new strongman, General Prayut, decided to take a cue from other strong leaders and asked students to start to be indoctrinated into what he called were 12 values. So in addition to the morning ritual of Thai students having to raise the flag, have a Buddhist prayer, sing the national anthem, they also had to remember and memorize General Prayut's 12 values. Did it work? Is that what we are seeing on the street today? Well, these are some of the questions I hope our panelists will address. So our panel this evening is Ajahn Kovit Wongsurawat, an associate professor of political science at Kasetsart University. Kuntida Rungkiat, we know her from her one avatar as MP for Future Forward Party, but now she wears a new hat as a member of the progressive movement and does a lot of work in education. We have a young speaker Akarason Opilan or Ang Ang, who will give us a perspective of her generation. And finally, Ajahn Pavida Pananon, Associate Professor of International Business at Thammasat, who probably is well known to some of us. She has spoken here before, and she and her husband, Che, wrote a column in the Bangkok Post the other day about the agony of what's happening in the university system in Thailand. So may I ask the speakers to join me on the panel. An announcement to those of you who are following our program from afar. If you do have questions, then do shoot in our direction. And when we open the panel for questions, a member of the club will read some of the queries that have come our way. The order of speakers, I've asked Kuntida to set the stage for today's panel discussion. And she has a presentation, PowerPoint presentation, if I'm right. So please, go ahead.
All right. Good evening, everybody. So excited to be here, not as an MP. But I'm still working in education. I'm still working in the education committee as the advisor to the chair. Well, to answer the question, what's wrong with Thailand's education system, everything's wrong, but there's one thing that is right. And I'm going to tell you later what that one thing is. Okay, let me grab my note. There's so many acronyms, abbreviations. Right. So I'm going to be very technical at the beginning, a lot of numbers. And I'm going to be quite a little bit of legal and budget in the middle. And I'm going to be quite emotional at the end. That's how I design my speech today. Well, if you ask the question like, why do we study, why do we learn? And in Thailand, people would go for, I go to school so that I pass the test, and that's it. So, the test. And if you go look at the test, the national test, which is the exit exam of Thailand, I'm talking about full 100 score. And you see the number like 30-something, 20-something in English. The question is it about our students? Are they not capable of learning? Is it about the quality of education, what happened in classroom? Is it about the test paper? Is it about the test paper? Is the test paper okay? Is it in good quality? I'm going to answer those questions today. So it means that our students are not doing well, even though they're tested on our national exams. One question that I can answer right now is that if you look at the standard error of the mean, 4 to 7, if you are in education, you know that you can't have this high error in test paper. So you want the error to be minimal, close to 0. In Thai national exam paper, is 4 to 11. So it's extremely high. And the standard deviation is also very high. So this is very concerning. What are we testing our kids with? Going to international, the PISA, You all know the PISA. This is the reading score. And in 18 years, we're going down at exponential level. So we're going down to the score of lower from the point in 2000 to, I should use this, 2000 to 2018, we're lower 38 points. And why I'm bringing up this PISA score on reading, because it has everything to do with the critical thinking level of the students. And when we go to this boring chart, everybody know that the problem in Thai education is inequality, and we do have groups of students who don't have good access to good education, to quality education, and they don't have security in their lives. But what does that mean? In terms of access, we're still having 4,500 students and 80 students without the school in that sub-district in 2020. So we have students who have to travel really far in order to go to school. And that's 78 sub-districts in Thailand. Once again, this is 2020. Students in poverty, so we're talking about household with 3,000 baht income per month per 4 people. And that number is around 3.6 million students in this country. So when we're talking about the inequality, then the number shows. But not just this, not just the access, but also the whole system actually widen the gap of inequality rather than trying to close that gap. We're having an extremely centralized bureaucratic polity in the management, in the administration. I'm going to talk about 2 important issues of that today, which is the budget and the personal. If you look at the country, we have around 20.5%. This is last year. This is this year data. The budget allocation for the capital expenditure. But when we look at education expenditure, it was reduced from 6% to 4.6% this year. So basically, we're not spending the money in the right direction. So where does the money go? Everybody knows that the money in the budget in the Ministry of Education is one of the highest. Where does it go? So almost 80% goes to the teachers and their salary. And then you have to again ask this question, so okay, we're spending a lot on the teachers. We should expect a very, very good quality education, right? Yeah, it looks like we're having a very, very good education system because if you look at this, we have enough teachers. 1 teacher per 19 students. It sounds like Finland to me. It does sound like Finland. Wow, that is good. But then this is the problem. If you look at this chart, sorry, it's in Thai, but 45.29 is the teachers, we call it คศ3 in Thai. So they are a highly specialized teacher. So we have enough teachers. We have highly specialized teachers, like half of them specialized. But look at this. what's wrong? What's going on? So first problem with the teachers, I'm sure and Pavida will talk about that too, is that the way that the teachers earn that status of highly specialized, they are assessed through the papers submitted to the authority rather than the actual performance of the students. So it's all about papers. Let me go to, yeah. Right, so it's all about paper rather than the quality of the classroom, or if we go up higher to the administration, Thai schools were not really assessed on facilities, on how good the classrooms are, on whether you have good quality library or not. So teachers are not well trained, but they get really, really high salary because they are up on this specialization rank. So those 45-something% teachers earn a lot, and their income can be pretty, I think it's higher than some of the university teachers at the moment. That's the issue. So basically, in terms of career path, they can just submit the papers and get their career path up and up and up. So to me, this is one of the biggest failure of Thailand education system. Well, and then we talk about inequality. I said we have enough teachers. That's true. If all the schools are the same, then yes, we have enough teachers. But all Thai schools are not the same. We're having at the moment half of the Thai schools, which are small schools. Small schools by the system means less than 200 students. And we also have like extra super large school, which can have up to 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 students. And if you look at these schools, the total number of students, 2,000 something and 91 on average. You cannot have the exact same administration or budget allocation to these two types of schools. But what Thailand is doing is that we are doing the exact same thing. So we're doing this per head budget allocation. So if you are in the smaller school, you receive virtually nothing because you have 91 students multiplied with whatever you get. So how come you can have a good education, good quality education for the students? And if you look at the teachers per class, because everything is calculated by the number of students, the big school gets almost 2 teachers per class, where the smaller schools or super small school get less than 1 teacher per class, or 1 teacher, because you have 91 students. You can only have 1 or 2 teachers, and that's it, because we count per head. So those 1 or 2 teachers teach everything and basically takes care of everything. We're talking about around 15,000 schools out of 30,000 schools in Thailand. So 15,000 schools are small schools. So half of that. So this is the condition we're in at the moment. And if you look at the total number of teachers per school, you see that 81.7 and 7.6. So instead of having a really efficient administration, management, we're trying to have this policy of one size fits all, so that it's easy for the government officials. It's easy to, allocate teachers and it's easy to allocate budget because you know the exact number where to give so that you can inspect that easily. Okay, right. So these are, to me, these are the issues, two issues that are really have a big impact on on the fact that we cannot yet improve the education system in Thailand. It has been the issue for a really long time, and I have, from my experience in the parliament, I don't see a will to change. Go back to the teachers. I've been talking about numbers. I've been talking about the fact that they are extremely specialized, but they're not performing. There is this one big and challenging issue for Thailand: the motivation of people to become a teacher. With the condition of the economy at the moment, being admitted to whatever government bodies, agencies, would be a guarantee to a better life. And to do that, being a teacher is a path. So instead of wanting to be a teacher, first they want to be the government official. And to me, that is heartbreaking in every way. The fact that we will have some teachers, not all, of course, we do have great teachers. Some teachers who are there in school because the need to have a better life and nothing else. We will have teachers who basically have no idea what they are doing there. And with the economic situation at the moment, what I'm seeing is that we're going to have more and more of those teachers. I'm not targeting anyone in particular. I think the system is really corrupted in that sense. Apart from this, for Thai education, we are extremely agile in the bad way. So, we are. What I face in the parliament and from my experience working in education is we change the ministers every 11 months. Think about a country that has the Minister of Education changing every 11 months. And what comes with each minister is this flagship policies. They're whatever policies that can sell. So it means that policy lasts 11 months. Well, there are some policies that last longer because if you look at the 12 core values, that last a little bit longer because of you know who. But we do have many of that policies. Back then we had this trying to reduce the number of hours that students have to study in school. We have that for a really short while and then it's gone and that's it. We change the national curriculum quite a lot in details, not yet the whole thing, but in details, we change that quite many times. In 2024, we're going to run another national curriculum, which is the competency-based curriculum. And I'm not sure whether our government is ready to implement that or not. Well, currently, we're having this coding as a subject. And you're going to see the effect of that because it's the first time that the coding will be included in the national examination testing the students in the pandemic era for the first time. So basically, we have all very politically led policies, very unstable, agile in the bad way policies. But most important, I think, if you look at the Basic Education Act of Thailand, there is one very important element missing. Our will is never be about the students. If you read the act, I cannot find the section where it says students should have good well-being in school. The school should be safe, a safe place for students. If you read the act, you will not be able to find that. But in trying to defend them, we do have the Child Protection Act. But the problem that comes with that is Education Act belongs to the Ministry of Education. Child Protection Act belongs to the Ministry of Welfare. So we're not working together. Basically, to me, the Education Act in Thailand should focus more, not just focus, but should take students as the key to education. I don't see that spirit in any draft of Education Act of Thailand, no matter we're having around 3 or 4 drafts at the moment discussing the one from the Education Council, the one from Education Committee, the one from the Senate. We're discussing acts, but those acts do not have the students in them. And if looking back, I'm specialized in Finnish education system, so I try to check their act as well. I want to make sure that what I was thinking is not just me, being hallucinated. So, in section 25, students in Finland have right to a safe environment. In section 31, they have right to the instruction. And in other sections, their Basic Education Act even mentioned about the way to remove the students if the students have disruptive behavior from classroom. That should be without violence. We never have that. We never have any acts in Thailand before that really pay that much attention to the students. So that's why the implementation never happened. And if you ask a lot of questions why there's so many things that are wrong with Thai education, I would say the Ministry of Education and the many people in them. But there is only one thing that is right. Our students. In my past experience, I was told that, go back to the test score. That's the test score. But today there are proving that despite being in this system, being in this kind of environment, they are able to think critically, express their opinion, and they are having a will to change their society. So the students are my hero. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kuntira. And I think that's a nice segue to our next speaker, who happens to be a student. And we'd like to hear a rather refreshing account from somebody who she was referring to as the future of Thailand and hope.
My name is Ang Ang, and I am 16 years old, and I go to an international school here in Bangkok. And branching off from what Kuntida said, what I would like to talk about today is the culture of seniority here in Thai society and in Thai education. So about 5 months ago, 3 of my other friends and I co-founded a student-led organization or network called Choose Change, in which we publish opinionated articles about social issues. And the reason for that is because I have noticed a lot of students from international school students, not all of them, but many, are detached from these issues regarding about social issues. And therefore, we want to advocate students to speak more about them. And later on, I became a columnist at Disrupt, where I wrote about Thai politics and the role of youth. And a lot of people ask me why I decided to become vocal about my political views, why I decided to become vocal about my opinions on social issue in such a conservative country, in such a conservative community, and in such a conservative school. And the reason for that is because I have noticed that in my community, there's a lot of people who have the privilege to be apolitical. And that privilege to be apolitical creates this bubble of ignorance. And the only way to burst that bubble of ignorance is through education, knowledge, and advocacy. And secondly, a lot of people, including youths ourselves, underestimate the power of youth because of the seniority system that I will be discussing. They think that, oh, even if I come out to speak against the injustices, no one will listen to me because my voice won't be heard, because my voice doesn't matter. This is the environment that we have created in the society, in this system of education. More specifically, I would like to talk about the feudalistic seniority system that is present in Thai society. And in the past, Thailand has adopted a feudal system, ระบบศักดินา And although that system was abolished, its core idea of militarism, authoritarianism, and most importantly, fear, has managed to manifest and bleed into society, into education. We were taught from a young age that you have to respect your elders. That is a quality of being a good child, being a good student. You have to respect your elders. ต้องเชื่อฟังผู้ใหญ่ And I'm not saying that you shouldn't respect your elders. You definitely should. But the problem is that when adults, certain adults, some adults, now believe that respect equals obedience, which that shouldn't be the case. Because as soon as obedience equals respect, the idea of authoritarianism now becomes justified. And one might think that with time, a country's education should move forward, should improve. But I suppose that Thailand here is a special exception. And the first type of obedience that I would like to talk about is the physical display of obedience. It is something that can be seen everywhere in our daily lives, something as simple as eye contact, maintaining eye contact. One of my close friends has told me that when she was 6 years old, she had an argument with her dad, just another heated argument, a 6-year-old kid and her dad. And then just like any 6-year-old would, she looked at her dad. And then her dad got even more mad. Her dad was fumed. And she didn't understand why. She just looked into her dad's eyes. And the reason for that is because her dad told her that looking at an adult's eye, looking directly into their eyes, meant that you were challenging their authority. And you see where that points out? It highlights how fragile authority is. It highlights how in this culture, we now normalize adults patronizing kids, something as simple as looking at adults in the eyes. And this leads to how submission is now our normalized culture. And why is that a problem? That is a problem because it paves its way to the second type of obedience that I would like to talk about, which the second type of obedience is called silent, another very common one seen in schools in our society. And just like how we were taught that we have to respect our elders, we were also taught that it would be safer if you keep your mouth shut. It's safer to not speak about certain things, to not voice your opinions. And I come from an international school, and it's quite interesting to see how our Western teachers treat us differently from our Thai teachers. With my Western teachers, I feel very comfortable in speaking about what is right and what is wrong, about voicing my opinions. But with certain Thai teachers, I am not. the older, in this culture of seniority, the older you are, the more authority you have. And with authority comes power. But to certain adults, they believe that the only way to maintain their power is through silence, which is incorrect, because respect is necessary for power to sustain. But unlike obedience, respect cannot be forced. Power only works if we succumb to it. And this is system of seniority, system of obedience, system of oppression using silence, allows students like me, allows youth like me to blindly succumb to these powers, and therefore certain people with authority abuse and corrupt them, and we can't even say anything about it. Schools should be a place that teaches students how to ask questions. To question does not mean to challenge. Youth like me, we ask because we are genuinely curious. We do not want to challenge authority. But curiosity is the foundation of all creativity, which is what the education should represent. But contradicting to that, education, the school that I am in, the society that I am in, creates this environment of fear. And with fear, we unknowingly give power to those who are above us, which creates this gap of the powerful and the powerless. And this gap allows the authority people with power to feel immune to the issues that are prevalent in front of them. The education system should foster kids to have the courage to ask questions. The education system should be a place where students feel safe to ask questions because of their genuine curiosity, so that in the future, we don't blindly obey to authority. As I mentioned before, our intentions as youth, most of the time when we question, is not to challenge authority. Skepticism is something that should be normalized, not condemned. Most of the time when we ask questions with adults, our questions are answered with, because it is the way it is. You're just a kid. Why are you speaking about it? As a writer that I have wrote several articles for Disrupt, I have encountered this many times. After my first article was published, there were many comments on a lot of social media platforms on how you're only 16. What do you have to say? What right do you have to say about the society? Why are you questioning so much? You're only 16. And another example is how the environment of fear is so normalized, even at school. I was called in, not officially called in, but I had a conversation with a teacher in my school in regards to my articles and in regards to the previous protest last week at the Democracy Monument. And I want to question, why is that so? And I asked advice from my Western teachers who seemed to sympathize with me and sympathize with my cause and what I'm writing for. And it is so sad to see them also say, I support your initiative, but I'm so sorry. It is the way it is. And after that, after youth activists like me come out to speak about the injustices, or when we come out to protest, we are then labeled as nation haters. And then you wonder why we decide to come out to fight for equality, to fight for democracy, to fight for freedom of speech. And the reason for that is because we were never given an explanation to why these authorities deserve our respect. We were never given a reasonable explanation to why dress codes and censorship will help better our education. And lastly, as I would like to emphasize again, students shouldn't be afraid to speak their minds. การเมืองเป็นเรื่องของทุกคน Politics concerns everyone. Because youth are the future of our country. Who are you to tell us that you have no say about the issues that are prevalent in society here? Because in the next 10, 20, or 30 years, the future is ours. Schools should equip youth with the knowledge and feed into their curiosity, because it is our future, because it is my future that I am concerned for. I do not want to live in a society where the abuse of human rights, where social injustice is so normalized. If you force us to be silent now, when will we get to fight for our future? education should be a safe place for us to voice our opinions, so that in the future, when we become adults, we can make good choices for the society. And I would like to end it with, it is not only about education reform, because that is not enough. It is about changing the social construct of the feudal system, of the oppression, of this idea that obedience equals respect. And only then, after that social construct is broken down, can our society move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ang. And I think some of the questions you raised might probably be answered by Ajahn Kovit, because he's going to, it's his turn. And Ajahn, please.
Thank you for having me here. Lately, when I going to the panel discussion, I always be put to become the first speaker, because I'm according to the feudalistic seniority, you know. And, but I came to I came to hear the right place is the civilized place, you know, to put me into the third, and I'm very happy, and so I can still some of the information for the speaker before me. I am very happy about it, you know. I'm very happy about it. And for the topic tonight, when we talking about the what's wrong with Thai education system, well, we can see it start right away today at the Ministry of Education. All the secondary students went there and then blow the whistle and try to get rid of the Minister of Education. And I'm very impressed, and thinking of the time of 1962. I'm only 72 years old, you know. In 1962, I was someone from the teacher and said, you go out and demonstrate against the Cambodia. And we go out, you know, by the agenda of the government. I never dreamed of the secondary school students went on their own will to chase out the Minister of Education. I'm very impressed, and thinking of this show about what's wrong with the Thai educational system. Well, I have been teaching in the university for 48 years. And I started in 1972 up until today. And I think that I just claim from my experience, because I don't have much of the information, so I just talk from my experience only, is that I observe what's wrong with the Thai education system into point, which is my little sister here already vocal. The first one is for my 48 years experience, I can see what's wrong with it. The first one is that, well, I seem to forget. Excuse me. I have the note in here. Yeah, the first one of the must of Thai education is to make the student docile, and obedient. And when you docile and obedient, you become a good student. So they kill the great gift of the nature, which is curiosity. They kill it systematically until, when you get into the high school, you just believe in silence is golden and obedient equal as a good student. And the second point, when they succeed in making the student docile and no question asked, silence is golden, and then the second point that they made is memorizing without understanding, so they can push the propaganda and the wrong information and the thing that further the elite and the government agenda, by without for the student to memorize without understanding. The good example is that when they go out to make to vote for a referendum of the stupid constitution, the present constitution, nobody read it, nobody understand it, but they vote yes, overwhelmingly. So it just, they succeed. And from my experience, I think the thing that really making the student wake up is the mysteriously disappear of the brass pact, brass pact, at the Royal Plaza. No, this is, where's the king ride on the horse monument. We have the brass pact and it disappear. So it's kind of wake-up call for the young student. Said, what is the brass pact? What's so important of that? And later on, the whole monument near Ksesat University disappear. The whole monument, so the young student start with their their phone, and start looking into the Google and Wikipedia and something like that, and then they start learning, and they start thinking that, hey, we are taking as a fool. And I think this is a waking up thing, and then it shows the failure of education in Thailand now, and it's so starkly obvious. And I am glad that I live to see today. And I think that after this, I think it's okay with me now, because the students are such as my little sister here, I'm very proud and very happy about it. And since I'm only 72 years old, and I'm speaking of my experience, that's all, so I think that I should end it here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ajahn Kovit. And Ajahn Pavida, you have...
Thank you, Mariwan. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for having me here on a topic that I rarely discuss at the FCCT, education. I think two reasons that I am here on this panel with very impressive speakers and Ajahn Kovit, who I follow on social media, and very impressive experience. The two reasons is probably, first, I cannot, like many of you, I cannot say no easily to Gwen, who is the president of the FCCT. So when she say that, she would like another person to fill this panel on something that is related to university, and can I do it? So I am here. So that's part of the reason. And the second reason is probably I am part of the education, and perhaps I have been part of the education problem in Thailand at the university level. I teach at Thammasat Business School of Thammasat University, and I have been there for over 20 years now. Not as long as Ajahn Kovit at Kasetsat, but reaching, accumulating the years as well at Thammasat. And recently, Dr. Titinan and I had a joint op-ed together, because we feel that one area that has not been discussed much about education problem is actually the institution of education. We normally hear a lot about schools. We hear a lot about the Ministry of Education. We don't get to hear a lot about universities and how universities are managed, or how university professors are promoted or are treated. Because I think part of the reason we seem to think that university is perhaps toward the end of the pipeline, where students have already been somewhat formulated and they come to university. And then the problem with the education perhaps have already been there before it reached the university. Perhaps part of that is true, but we don't seem to look at the education within universities. And another thing that I think that we seem not to pay much attention to as part of the problem is how university professors are treated. If you are looking at university as an organization that requires human resource, their task is to produce students, progressive students, and students that are to go out into the work career. That's like an organization that needs to look for qualified people to go into the university itself. Would you believe it that my department, the Department of International Business, Logistics and Transport, we have been opening a position to fill in for university professor. Over 2 years, we still cannot fill that position. And my school, as well as perhaps the Department of Economics, I'm not sure if Ajahn Wasana, who is at another leading university of Chulalongkorn University in the Faculty of Arts, I don't know if you're experiencing that in your university. But for my school, the business school, that people seem to think that I should have no problem getting people to teach. They might want to become guest teacher, guest lecturer, but no one rarely wants to come in and join as the full-time faculty. And then you start to ask questions, if that is the case, how do we then provide good education if we cannot get good people to come into the system to begin with? Perhaps 50 years ago, when you look at the applicant to universities, particularly the two leading ones, Chulalongkorn and Thammasat, and Kasetsat, the three leading ones in Thailand, and Mahidol from that family as well, Mahidol University as well. When you look at the applicants for university position, perhaps 30 years from now, you will have a lot of people who graduate from all the established and prestigious university in the world, Oxford University, London School of Economics, and all these things. But what I am seeing applicants to my university now, perhaps is less prestigious, and a lot of them are graduate of PhD program, perhaps in the country as well. In many cases, in the university, in Thai university themselves. And I ask myself, why are we not attracting more people to come in the pipeline? And I think that the university is part of the problem. And I think that's why I decided to reflect more on why the promotion system or the university reflects a lot of other culture in the Thai society and reflects a lot of culture of the institution that shapes a lot of our education that Kun Kuntida and Ang has already addressed. And I think the university management in some aspect is a relic of its past. I don't know if any of you noticed, this morning there was page 3 of the Bangkok Post of the kind of an the announcement of Ministry of Education. They had a big meeting yesterday with the Ministry of Education. And you look at that photo and you might be thinking that, are we serious? Are we really talking about Thailand 4.0 with these people? Because they were all in uniform, of the government uniform, addressing how Thailand education should go forward to Thailand 4.0. And I was like, seriously, that's on educational reform for Thailand 4.0. So I started to read what they are talking about and what would be the project for the next 11 months under the current Ministry of Education. And I think the new term we are going to hear a lot on education ecosystem. And that means the ecosystem of the university, of institutions that are related to education. And I look at the part that relate to university and what should be my ecosystem. Should I be more green? Should I be more something according to the university? And then it says that the ecosystem for the university is a new project with some kind of abbreviation. I don't remember now. But when you said that we are more driven by projects that perhaps are driven by certain minister, and then that's why we are not seeing a lot of things that are the problem of what and how institutions are run. And I would like to address 2 issues that I find the promotion of a professor in university. If you need a context, in June, the Office of Higher Education Commission, in Thai we call them OHEC. When I don't remember what it is, I remember it as, oh, what the heck. So it's OHEC. OHEC has somewhat issued a new regulation for university promotion. And it took immediate impact the next day. So people were like, what? This was announced in the Royal Gazette in the next day about the new kind of requirements that require a lot more stringent regulation on publications and everything. So I thought that it reflects many things that we are seeing in Thai society. First, we are seeing rules that are made by very top-down, elite-driven, centralized system, an organization that decided this is the rules that should apply to everybody, and this is how it should be. And I think the centralized system of promoting university professors in Thailand these days is questionable, because if you look at the number of 171 universities that we have in the country that is under the Ministry of Education, you would see that a lot of them are different. Some are research universities that play the game of international ranking, want to do that. Many are also regional university in smaller province with the main concern of doing community service for the universities, while some others tend to be more technical in some particular area, for example, focusing on STEM, science and technology. So to have the regulation that applies to all university professors, that is a very centralized system in the age where difference matter. And with that kind of centralized system, it's difficult for university to have their own vision and mission and go to their own path to develop the kind of human resource that they want. So that's one problem that I see. And another thing that is part of that is that Thailand is part of global system, although COVID might dampen that a bit. And you might not know that university is part of that as well. So the internationalization of education that is required from university, from ranking, publication of professors, and all those things play into the regulation of the new promotion system. And that becomes kind of the main objective for many university professors, because the requirement for promotion becomes like what you said, you know, submitting paper, but in the case of university professor is perhaps submitting research and publication and all that. So the teaching or the area where you really have to interact with students in classroom becomes part of the overall things that you have to do, not the main thing that you have to do. Although you get really refreshed when you have students like Ang, and then you feel like that's why you are doing what you are doing. When you are a teacher and when you see students like this, you feel like, you know, you're rejuvenated and you feel like your career still has a purpose. Okay. And so I think the first one of not realizing the diversity of university and then to impose the centralized system that is perhaps archaic and not up to par with everyone can match that is one of the problems in the university aspect. The second thing is the lack of fair and equal and transparent system that people can check how their promotion is done. And I think this reflects a lot on why we are looking at the lack of trust and the lack of trust in the system, like the law and justice system. The big case is the Red Bull case, when people start to lose trust in the system because they feel that things are unfair and unequal, and you cannot do anything to check and balance and to look into the transparency of doing things. So I have been through the several rounds of promotion from when I started as just lecturer and go to the ranking. And I have noticed that, you know, the system of promotion in university is somewhat like a black hole. You kind of submit your paperwork and then you kind of sit and wait for, I just have the official record from Thammasat. Official average of Thammasat for promotion, one promotion, any position takes about 18 months to proceed. So that means that you submit your promotion and then you kind of forget about it for 18 months before you know the result. And the rejection rate for the level of assistant and associate professor is about 10%, whereas the rejection rate for full professor is about 50%. And for that 50% or that 10%, it's very difficult for you to see why, how you can follow up. And I think that for university to go into the more international, we can perhaps do more things to integrate check and balance and transparency. One of the things I did, I don't know if Thammasat University like it or not, is that when I was doing my paperwork for promotion, I actually did a database of all the people who can read my work. Because they say that, you know, when you are applying for example, you're applying for full professorship, the only people who can read you are people who are already full professor. So was not sure how people would be selected, and I thought that, in international conference, when you select reviewer, you kind of know who to select based on their specialty and everything. But in Thailand, there is no way that you can do that. So what I did was I basically researched all the names of the people that could read me, and then present it as a database to Thammasat University and say that, perhaps this would help your work easier a little bit, because I did update and check whether someone has already passed away, and I mentioned that dead and or not being able to read. So I did help and update the information. At the same time, I also update on the keyword, and I use kind of a citation, Google Scholar citation or other citation to identify their specialty, and also to make sure that, for people to do something, at least there would be some criteria to select people to read. And I think that they probably did not like it too much, but I heard from Thammasat, Deputy Assistant to Director, that they are also thinking along the line of creating a database of 6,500 readers in Thailand to perhaps to do this. I don't know, they probably are thinking about that, but I think including some kind of technology that can be used to create check and balance without being, going to tell them that they are not transparent or something. I think for university, they should be the first institution that are open to systems that are using technology, transparent, and based on something that is objective, such as citation index or something like we call Google Scholar citation, rather than relying on subjective judgment of people who you don't know if the judgment can be biased because of some personal thing or something like that. And I think that for any system to instill more fair, equal, and transparent, so that the onus is not on just the people who are doing the work, but also on the system. And the system is also being more questioned. And I think that's something that we need more in education system, where we can question different things, including question the system where you are promoted as well. And I think through questioning and through putting more transparency in all kind of system is the way that we would move forward. And I hope that education system can somehow be moved forward with more open and questioning of the system, such as the panel today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ajahn Pavita. We now come to the more interesting Q&A section. There's a mic at the back, and I encourage those of you who want to ask questions to first identify yourselves and address your question and to any of the panelists. We have Kun Pia, who will probably read some questions that we have received from those of members and followers of the FCCT who have been following us from beyond these confines. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Pia. I'm a FCCT board member. So basically, I'm the person who asks questions on behalf of people who watch online. So for probably Kun Tida, there's a question in regards to English language efficiency. So our follower was asking what can be done basically to improve language efficiency, especially since our country is really tourism dependent and really needed much higher quality. And two more questions for Ang Ang. One is, what do you think about the incorporation of Buddhist values in the Thai education system? And the second question, also, what do you think about the losing face culture in Thailand? Thanks.
Okay, so why don't we have you take the crack at the first question? Okay.
Right. I should start with the update. The ministry is trying to use the CEFR test with the teachers. Can you guess the reaction of the teachers, the Thai teachers? So they asked the teachers to be tested. Right, I think reading from your facial expressions, they were not really happy. And some comments from the teachers or some feedback was, I teach physical education, I don't need to know English. So I think the root cause of this is English was never perceived as communication means in Thai education system. English was perceived as content. Very, very lost kind of content, because I remember when I was young, I was in an English class and I have to read the commercial textbooks from somewhere, and then I had to know how to use the tube in London. I remember that, and I was thinking like, okay, when will I go to London? Or why am I learning this? But it was taught in a very prescriptive, very content-led way. And back then, I was tested in a very, very descriptive way as well. If you're in my generation, if you still remember your entrance examination, when they test your ability to communicate, it was 4 choices. How are you? A, B, C, D. And I was like, oh, it's not the ability to communicate, it was the ability to remember. And if I would have to do that exam again, I would never be able to do that. By the way, I scored 90 something back then. I memorized well. I was so good at memorizing. And if you cannot train teachers to actually teach English as communicative tools or means, the English language will never be better. And under another condition, I think with Thailand being this, we're in the status where we use English as a foreign language, not even the second language. We're using that as a foreign language. We don't really have the environment or the context that, students use English every day, right? Therefore, the first language is really important, because when your first language is strong, you have the asset to build up, and then you can use those rules or whatsoever you learn from the first language to apply to the foreign language you're using. It cannot be all natural learning process, right? You still have to do some grammar and that stuff, but that helps the understanding of the language as well. But for me, without the foundation of the first language, then it's quite difficult for many students to be able to learn the foreign language they're using well. So 2 things. The first, the whole teachers training has to change. So from content to communication. And again, the first Thai language has to be taught in the same manner as well. On one note, when I was young, like her age, I remember my Thai class in 2 different ways. One is that I read literature and then I listen to my teacher's interpretation of that whatever literature, and I memorize, and that's it. That will happen that will appear in my exam. And the second thing, I did not learn how to create or produce language that much. I was taught, I'm sure that many of you here will share the same experience. You were taught how to write official letters, right? That was That was the creativity in the Thai class. Apart from the official letters, another thing that I was taught was poetry. So I have to be able to follow all the Thai sonnet or whatsoever. So with the way that the whole education look at language, I think it's really far away from being able to improve the English language teachings in Thailand. But good news is that our students are more active these days, and they have access to media, whatever media possible. I'm one of the students who study in Thai school, and I went to a Thai university before I ended up in Finland for a while. And me being able to speak English is because of Backstreet Boys and novels, not exactly from the school. So on one way, yes, it's quite sad, but on the other hand, the students got a lot of opportunities these days.
Thank you. Pangang, your question on...
So I think that the first question was on my opinion on Buddhism and education. So first of all, I would like to state that no religion is bad as long as it is not used as an advantage or used as a tool. And personally, I think I am grateful that I have grown up in an environment where freedom of religion was an option. But I think that for certain schools that may not have that, I think it is actually very wrong to try to impose a certain religion without trying to explain why is that so, or using religion as a tool. For example, if a student does something bad and then a teacher happens to reply that, oh, you can't do that because that's a sin. ทำแบบนั้นไม่ได้นะมันเป็นบาปทำแบบนั้นไม่ได้ and then the student replies, why is that a sin? Who said so? And then the teacher responds, because God says so, because it's just like that. And if the conversation always ends with not being able to explain or justify the reasons for using religion as a tool, then I think that is very wrong. That is going against the fundamental freedom of expression. And another thing that I would like to note is I have noticed a lot of my peers, and I myself don't identify or don't fit into any religion simply because I identify as an atheist, and a lot of my friends do so too. And there's this culture in Thailand, and I'm not sure if it's in other country, but it's not very popular to not be religious. There's this sense of good, noble sense if you're religious. For example, if I said that I'm a Buddhist and like, oh, you're at the very base level, oh, you might have a good soul, and you're going to heaven, you're not gonna go to hell. And then I have a lot of people ask me, so if you're not religious, then if you die, where do you think your soul goes? And I'm just like, is that the sole determination of where religion is supposed to lead you, to just answer if you'll go to heaven or to hell, but not as a philosophy to guide you? And so I think that's one point that is very interesting to point out. Another one is, for example, there are many occasions here in Thailand in education with using religion to pray. For example, during a couple of months ago with the COVID pandemic, when the government has decided to have a mass prayer, and they believe that mass prayer would help us relieve us from the COVID-19 situation. I found that very interesting, and here's something that I wanted to say, that you can't use religion or sinning or going to heaven or hell as an excuse for any social issue or social injustices that youth point out, because I'm going to say that no matter how many good deeds you do in this life, if the Constitution does not change, even if you're born into your next life, you're still going to be stuck in the same loop of poverty and injustice.
Thank you.
And I think the second question was about losing face. Can you clarify a bit more on...
As in being embarrassed, is that right? Loss of face? Is that a Thai expression for that?
Yeah, like in what situation in coming out to speak, or the humiliation in the school system? So the humiliation in the school system is also another tool of obedience, physical display of obedience. For example, if I've seen on the news that if your hair is, if you get dress coded, if your hair is a certain length, the teacher brings you out in front of school and just cuts your hair. And one, I would like to point out that the teacher cannot do that. But other than that, this culture of humiliation, again, as what I said, is used to oppress students, is used to make them believe that, oh, if I do this, because if I do this, I don't want to get humiliated, therefore I cannot speak up against something, therefore I cannot this and that and that. And because this culture of humiliation, because no one wants to be humiliated by school, and because of that, because of humiliation, it is now used as an advantage, as a tool to get a student to follow a certain set of rules, and so they don't question them. So yeah, those are my opinions on the two topics, or the two questions.
Thank you. Next question. Please identify yourself.
Hi, I'm Michael Clark. I'm CEO of Kingsman Hospitality. This is to all of you. One thing I've not heard you talk about is vocational education. You have currently in Thailand 680,000 vocational students, and with the current pandemic going on, 26% of your GDP comes from tourism and agriculture. At the moment, you only have 50,000 students in these sectors. What is your say about vocational training at all? Because I've worked with the Ministry of Education here, especially with the hospitality, and I went through their curriculum, and they give 4 credits out of 122 credits for practical experience. I'm Danish. I'm an educated chef. I spent a 3.5-year education on working as a chef. More than half of that was in a kitchen. How do you expect that you teach these people to reach those standards, especially when your GDP is so high in these two factors?
Pravita, do you want to take a crack at that? Because, I mean, just to add to his question, risk analysts who are approached by foreign investors to assess whether they should invest in Thailand or not always rank political instability as one of the first factors to consider. And the second area of concern is the lack of skilled labor. The education is not producing a labor force to meet the challenges, even of 4.0, which General Prayut hopes Thailand will one day pursue. But could you take a crack at that question?
Thank you for that question. I totally agree with you that we need to have more participation between the university and training. I think one of the problems with Thai vocational system is that we tend not to put good value in them, and vocational students are typically known to be violent and all that. So to begin with, they don't have very good reputation. And then another thing that I find has caused problem to this is that we upgrade all the kind of more polytechnic and vocational school to become university, because we want to somehow inflate the education so that people can have the undergraduate degree. And I think that is one of the value that people look when people hire someone. You look at the degree, the paper that you graduate from university, the paper that you graduate from some certain area. Actually, it's quite interesting you brought that up, because today was my first class at Thammasat. Last week was a holiday, so today was my first class. And usually I start my first class with a few reading that has to do with learning philosophy. Articles by Dr. Poi, Ajahn Poi, and he has written this since 1967, but it's usually an article that says, เรียนเพื่อสอบ Do you study for exams, or do you สอบเพื่อเรียน You take exam to study, or you เรียนเพื่อเรียน You study to become educated. And I asked my students what is their situation and what kind of thing that they would like to be. And they say that they would like to be in ideal situation, it should be เรียนเพื่อเรียน. But in their real life, they do เรียนเพื่อสอบ. And I asked why is that so? And they said that one of the problem that they find is that people employers and companies value so much the paperwork, the transcript, the graduate degree from university or something. So that's why everything is geared in that direction. They want to only get the degree, and that's part of the reason that a lot of vocational schools that used to be more like polytechnic are upgraded to become the university and lose that touch on focusing more on the training. And I think the third aspect to add to that is that Thai companies do not have the culture of opening up their companies to student interns. If you look at young students to look for short-term employment, gap year or something, it's not very much a culture here. And I think if you can somehow engage the private sector companies to see the importance of this, and it would become more accepted. The CP group has somehow started their own vocational school first for 7-Eleven, and now they have upgraded to become university with degree in even I don't understand the civil engineering and aeronautic engineering, but that's one thing. But to see the importance of vocational as company is needed, and I think it's not just in hospitality, but in other areas with heavy manufacturing as well. So I agree with your point on that.
Ajahn Kovik, would you like to shed some light on this? Because you've seen education being transformed over 40 years, and the question is about there seems to be a gap between what the country needs in terms of students who come from a vocational trained institution as opposed to, say, political science. And how has the government addressed the need to have a skilled labor force through an education system?
Well, I suppose that it comes from the feudalistic society, the value from the feudalistic society, because we so enchant for the position, to study to be เจ้าคนนายคน so it's not working with hand is looked down upon. So, just feudalistic society.
Okay, go ahead.
Can I have a short comment on this? I think one learning culture in Thailand is about being able to be a kind of scholar. The culture of learning from hands-on experience is not part of the learning culture here. And that's why the vocational college is kind of left out in the education setting. That's one. Another thing is, which is a common issue among the government agencies who are actually running the basic education and the vocational education, is that even though we're saying vocational 4.0 or whatsoever, or อาชีวะสร้างชาติ, that's what the government kept saying. If you look at the budget is very, very scattered. It lacks direction. If you go through details, I just go through details, they buying a lot of machines. And they're not doing a lot on the capacity building of the teachers, or working on other sectors, for example, trying to connect with the private sectors. But more on the machines that I asked the expert, do you really need this 5 million baht machine in one school, in one vocational college? No, you don't need that, because you can actually have that training with the actual industry, in the factory. But the spending lacks direction, and it was spent in such a way that it traumatizes me reading that.
Thank you. Next question.
Hi, Chon Thanatkan Thanatirut, journalist and co-founder at Disrupt. I'm not particularly sure if what I have here is a question, but So I feel like Thailand always set very unrealistic goalposts for test score for students. And each year it seemed to keep moving further and further from the students, which seems to also contribute to the whole mindset that everything needs to look good on paper. And so on top of the quality of the teachers and no discrimination towards them, do you think these unrealistic expectations for the student to do well on test paper score are also part of the problems of the education system here? Because then it also circles back to the how if your families have more money to send you to after school tutoring programs, then obviously you would be able to go further in life, and that feeds into the system of different classes and inequality in this society even more. So yeah.
And that's good. No, that's a good question, and maybe we can ask Angang to start from a student's perspective. How do you see this whole culture in response to her question?
Definitely, I agree with that. That is a culture that is very prevalent in Thai society, and I think among a lot of Asian cultures, on how we do have to focus a lot on our scores, and by that, a lot of students strive to earn good scores, and with that culture, we don't end up really learning, like Kuntida said, we end up only remembering. And something that I would like to note out is that adults think that certain adults feel that if you have a great score, if you get a full score or a 4.0 GPA, then it would be good because you would have a stable job in your future, and apparently that job can help improve Thai society as a whole. But I would like to say that a 4.0 GPA won't lead to a Thailand 4.0. การมีเกรดเฉลี่ย 4.0 จะไม่ทำให้เราไปถึงประเทศไทย 4.0 ได้ It is not only about scores. It is about how we use the things we learn in school to improve society. If, like Kuntida said, if the question is, how are you today? And there's A, B, C, D. And if you only remember that, when you go out into the real world, how are you going to say how you really are? It's just only about remembering. Again, a 4.0 GPA won't lead to a Thailand 4.0.
Kuntida, do you want to reflect on that?
I think there are two things. First, we're really lost on the standardized testing, the whole system. As I already mentioned, the quality of the question, the exam papers or the questions on the exam is not good. Another thing, the way we use those statistics or numbers are really wrong. So we test so that we can compare our students to others. Well, what it should be is that they should know where they are based on those numbers, if you are going to use the numbers. And when you look at the statistic as a whole, those ONET scores you see is used for promotion of school principals. Yes. And they have tutoring on those ONET as well. And this is on that level. For parents, we're still lost as well. If you go to Thai school, have you seen those vinyl signs with face of students, their scores, or the school that they were admitted in? To me, is the violation of privacy. But this is the culture for among many parents. If you ask them like, would you allow your student's face to be on that vinyl sign? They said, yes, of course, they should be proud. And on that particular sign, you have face, school name, some test score, and that's personal information. The parents also need to be educated as well, to understand what learning is. I'm not saying all parents, but I'm running a school at the moment. You can understand some of my pain. To try to really show them that the number on the paper should be for your kids to develop themselves. And there are other areas that we should also look at. Thai education has never looked at soft skills. Because we're busy focusing on content, and you know why? Because content is easy. When you focus on content and make those as exam questions, it's easy. There's only right and wrong, and that's it. If you do critical thinking, then it's quite difficult because you have to find the way to really craft your questions. And it has been going on like this. So from the way we look at testing, which is wrong, from the understanding of parents, which needs to be fixed, and the use of that on the students.
Okay,
Thank you.
Next question.
So my name is Hans, Startup Pulse Thailand Research and Entrepreneurship Faculty at Stanford University. Angang, it was a pleasure and honor to listen to a legend of the future and maybe a prime minister of the future. A question to you, to the dark side of youth and entrepreneurship in youth in Thailand. 15% of our youth aged 15 to 24, which is 1.1 million youth, are NETs. They are neither in employment, nor in education, nor in training. 1.1 million youth. How can you, with your ability to communicate, can you attract them, that we can get them into an educational or training system? And a question to my colleague from Thammasat. I'm observing, as an entrepreneurship faculty, I'm observing universities being highly top-down hierarchical organizations. How can you turn Thammasat, or how can you turn organizations like universities into entrepreneurial organizations that have the ability to address what you were discussing today?
Kuntida, for you first.
All right, me again. With the youth questions, I'm talking about the mechanism that already exists at the moment. We have this fund called Education Equitable Fund, where they try to target really poor students and using technology to map them so that they give the right help to the right people and keep them in the education system before they drop out. And I think that is the key. That is quite important, because if they drop out of the education system, you cannot find them. So, but again, the organization is governmental and they receive really low budget. When I was a I was a prime minister. I was an MP.
A good slip of the tongue. Good slip of the tongue.
It was from the heart, probably. When I was an MP.
You remember this day?
I was actually asking for more budget for this type of organization so that they can target the vulnerable group of students and also the poor students. And the number that I show you, 3.6 million students, they are from this organization, from their data. I like to promote their, really, you go and check their website. You can really go check each school in Thailand to see that they have really poor, how many poor students are there. They rate the students into like poor and extremely poor. And you can also help them. The private sectors can also help the school. So you get the right help to the right people. That's one thing. Another thing is this. I'm not sure what Gosano is in the non-formal education section in our government should be upgraded. Now, if you go to the Gosano or this non-formal education organization in Thailand. It looks really dull and gloomy. And they get quite a lot of money. They get quite a lot of budget. But then there's so many of these bodies in Thailand. They should be the future of the education, because the education will go more on the non-formal side, where, you know, if they can be this online hub, or they can be whatever hub for learning in each community, students can go there and learn and, you know, upgrade their skills. And not just students, where in this aging society, they should also welcome the older people who would also like to reskill, to upskill or unskill or whatsoever. So I see this organization as a hope if they can reform themselves. If they can reform themselves. Now they are pretty much on this working on being a place where you can go take an exam and get the certificate, and that's it. They should be more than that. I think they should speak up and plan the Thailand 4.0 in the future.
Thank you. Pravida, your question on Thammasat?
I think I agree with the online aspect, because I think that education these days should be more about what you can do from online. And I think for university is moving in the direction that curriculum should not be something that you fix with the required course, but more of a basket that reflects their interests. And that should be an opportunity that open to non-university as well. So I think I agree with Kun Kuntida on that. On the entrepreneurial university, moving something as big as university into entrepreneurial is something that would be, you know, very difficult. But I think one small area could be when you free up the budget from the university. I think we have been trying to make university becoming more autonomous from Ministry of Education. And that has its good and drawback as well. Some areas such as philosophy might not be as popular and might lose interest, whereas business school is okay on that. So to kind of be more independent on curriculum and everything, I think I see it as the way to go, because I don't see university as something that is centralized. But unfortunately, that's how the university want to do. They want to standardize courses across university. And that, I think, is a dangerous move to lessen the entrepreneurial spirit of university as well.
Thanks. Next question.
Thanks, Marwan. My name is Titinan Pongsutirak from, I teach at Chulalongkorn University for the last 27 years. I would like to extrapolate this discussion a little bit from education. We're talking about education reform, but in fact it's a microcosm of Thailand's larger challenges, shortcomings, the things that we need to fix. If you look around the world, in any country you go ask, and this question, by the way, is posed to the panelists who are younger than 40 and under. Higher than 40, you don't have to answer. But I want to engage the younger speakers. If you go into any country and you ask, how's your education system, they'll say, it's not good. Every country wants to fix its education system. So education is really a kind of the sum of what that society stands for. Right? The sum, and also, so society stands for liberty, freedom, pursuit of happiness, the US system, UK, Europe, and so on. You have critical thinking, you have freedom to think and speak, and the right to the basic freedoms, free speech, academic freedom. On the other hand, it's also a function of societies to have education system. The society needs to sustain itself, right? So it needs to produce people who can work and who can, have the manpower, you have the human resources, experts, and so on to sustain your economy. So if you look at it in that way, and you look around the world, you go to Harvard. Harvard is trying to fix its education system. All education systems are trying to keep up with the times. And you add in the advancing technological progress all the time. So all systems fall behind. So the problem for Thailand is that education has become a mold for the Thai identity, right? So it's not just an education system. Education in Thailand has been has gone through some changes. So 25 years ago, we used transparencies. It went to the blackboard transparencies, and eventually online learning. So technology side, it has progressed, but the education has become the basis of the Thai identity because it's been indoctrinated, inculcated in that fashion. So for the younger speakers, you have to think this way. So people like me, I can see, and I'm doing the teaching, but people who, in my generation, we grew up in an education system from the 60s, 70s, 80s, even 1990s. Over the sweep of the last 100 years, education reform has been, the buzzword or the main challenge, or only in the last 20 years. And that's because Thailand is facing a structural constraint. The Thai economy is not growing, not expanding as fast. It used to be 5, 6, 7, 8%, even double digits. So from that low base, now it has to make the value leap, right? It has to go through an upgrading in order to sustain the value chain and move up the value chain, become kind of a Malaysia, maybe South Korea, Taiwan, and so on. But this structural impediment, the structural trap of the Thai economy, has made education reform more urgent, more imperative, and more undeniable, indispensable. I think that without it, Thai economy won't grow. So this is why we're having a lot of issues, because Thailand has no future. The economy is not going to grow more than 1 or 2%, 3% the most. This year it will contract because of COVID, but it was also dismal before COVID, right? So a lot of young people, they see Thailand, there's no future ahead. So for the young people, what do you say to the people in their 40s and 50s and 60s who went to school, who were schooled in the 70s and 80s and 90s, even 60s, you go to school, you sing royal anthem, the national anthem, of course, the royal anthem. We used to sing martial music. We used to sing these martial songs. And we liked it. It was the days of the Cold War. And we were brought up, indoctrinated, shaped and molded as part of the fight in the Cold War. But now, things have changed. Over the last 20 years, no more communism, no more Cold War. And Thai economy going nowhere. And technology is galloping, advancing rapidly. So how would you get people in the older generation to see the world and to see Thailand the way that you do? Because they grew up with the symbols of nation, chart, religion, sasana, monarchy, Pramahakasat, right? So that's what they were brought up to believe in. But now this identity is being challenged to its core now. And I can see the challenges. We can see them on campuses. We can see them in the streets. But how would you, in the younger demographics, convince the older people, hey, this is the way ahead? But what I see now, and I fear, is not convergence. It's not persuasion, but alienation and separation. And that's a big risk for the youth movement, but also for Thailand.
So, Angang, maybe you can field that question. And probably, I think, just to add to what Jay was saying, I think the protests on the street is one answer to your question. But so what do you tell those who are in their 40s and above?
So I think it's, thank you for...
Screwed up the country for you? In short?
Like bringing out the point of alienation, because it's true that even though as youth, when we voice our opinions, like it may be for a better cause, maybe for what we think is right, but it definitely does create this sense of alienation between the generation of the 50s, the 60s, and the younger generation. And how can I change their minds, and how can youth change their mind? That is a very big question, and as you said, the protest right now is an example, but also how a lot of them can argue that, Chhat, Sasana, Pramahakasat is its main structure of how we should value, how society, it's the main structure of what keeps society and what keeps order. But the point is, what I can say is that time has changed. It is now the 21st century. It's not back then, like you said, the Cold War, communism. We're not enjoying, if we were made to sing this military song, we wouldn't be enjoying it because there's no more Cold War. There's no more communism. It isn't like 50 years ago. This is the now. And we have to make the older generation understand that it's not speaking up about things, about social issues. It's not about hating our nation. If I hated my country, why would I waste my time? Why would I spend my time reading books, going to protests, and getting risk of being expelled, suspended? Why would I be doing that if I hated my country? And another thing is that we have to tell adults that education, back then we might think that producing good students so we can improve our economy. This view creates this idea of how students after we graduate high school, after we graduate university, we're simply a means of production to improve Thailand's economy. And this idea creates, we're going back to the idea of how good grades and everything, it's all so fixed. It's like saying that, with the idea back then, it's like saying that education, as I would like to use that as a metaphor, it's like a race with a competition, a marathon between like a cheetah, a monkey, and a fish, and a giraffe. And you're saying that run, and whoever gets there first wins, and whoever gets there first is what exactly represents Chat, Sasana, Pamahakasat, greatness. This person has the potential to improve economy. But the thing is, how about the fish? You tell the fish to run, it's just gonna die. And then when I ask back, oh, what about the fish? What are you gonna do with the fish? And then they answer back with, oh, figure it out. How is a fish supposed to figure out how it's supposed to run? That idea, that concept of everything is fixed, is structured, can no longer apply to this. Yes, and 50 years ago, you might enjoy singing the military song because of the Cold War. And now there are other songs, but I'm not going to touch that. But point is, this structure, this has to change. We cannot be where we was 50 years ago, because how are we going to move forward? It's this idea of being stuck at 50 years ago during the Cold War cannot help improve economy. If you're using that an excuse as an argument, it cannot itself. 50 years ago, how are you going to explain communism and improving the economy? It just doesn't make sense. It's just contradicting itself. And the most important thing to not create alienation is to be tolerant and open-minded. And I'm not saying that, all conservatives are bad. No, it's very wrong to say that. The one thing that can prevent alienation is tolerance and understanding that even though, yes, you might be from an older generation and you might have a different political view or views on social injustice than me, but at the very least, we should be able to respect and have what is called human decency. บรรทัดฐานคือความเท่าเทียมกัน Everyone should be equal. Everyone should have the right to freely express their opinions. And it's going back to this idea of freedom of expression, this idea that 50 years ago structure can no longer be applied to this generation, because we're simply gonna be stuck here and never move forward.
Ajahn Covid, I just want to flesh out the point that Ajahn J made was, so you have a school system that is fundamental to the building of the Thai nation state. That's how schools have been established. It is almost a battleground for ideas. Is it sustainable? Because now teachers don't control knowledge, right? Students have access to information from technology, from Google, Twitter. She learned her English maybe through following songs, right? So is that sense of control sustainable? Schools have to be an area to build the nation. To you, Ajahn. No, yeah.
Okay. Well, I have a problem myself because I seem to be an outcast in my university, in my association, and in many places, because I maybe too ignorant maybe, because I always questions. I go around and asking people, what is a nation? Give me definition, and then I'm in the many places that they won't talk to me. In my university, in my old high school, You know, I went to the King's School, and I'm the member of a Royal Society, supposed to be the most conservative in the. When I get into there, and every time nobody talked to me, so I'm in the same problem.
Thank you. You have a question? Anybody?
Hi, so I'm a recent high school graduate, and I saw you guys talk about like academic side, so I want to shift it to the more like non-academic side. So in my senior year, I did a research on HIV and AIDS prevalence in Thailand, and I think one of the most important factor is health education, and I think education should help students to develop their confidence, their self-respect, and respect to others as well. So what are your take on these? Like, what do you think of the current health education, and just what you see as problems and what you want to improve on it?
Could you tell us your name, please?
Yes. My name is Nong Napat. Yeah.
Thank you. Anybody want to take a crack at that question? Health education.
Health education, that's me then. I think one big issue is there's some part of health education in Thailand that some teachers may look at it as taboo. And that's why it's not something that we can discuss. I remember back then when I was in my school, health education was discussed with closed windows. If we want to discuss sex, I was in a girls' school. So from cultural perspective, it was not looked at as knowledge or information, but rather than the taboo, and that's why it was not the actual knowledge that the students should know was not there. Another thing is that there are many issues in health education that is important that was not addressed. Consent is not addressed in health education. It was the concept that needs discussion, and this discussion was not a part of learning culture in Thai education. I think that's the very, very key point in why health education in many parts of Thailand still fails up until today.
And can I ask something to that? From my personal experience at school, another thing that I would like to add on is also how this sexism still exists within our society, the structure of this patriarchy that still exists in our society, and it teaches women that, you know, we don't own our body. And at school, every single year, there would be this class, they call it sex education, and a teacher would come in, and all the boys and the girls would be in the same class. And then she would be showing pictures of girls that are wearing short skirts, spaghetti straps, shorts, and then she would directly ask the boys in the class, my friends, who we've seen each other for 10 years, that, what is your opinion on this? What if your classmates were wearing like this? What would you think? And that was very shocking to me, because that itself, asking that question itself to the boys in my class, they have earned my trust, the trust of the girls in the class. What would you think? What would you do if your classmate was wearing a spaghetti strap? How sexist can this class get? And this idea that women don't own our body, this idea that, you know, protection is not taught in school, and sex is a taboo, as you have mentioned. And students don't know, then students won't know what protection is. STDs and AIDS increases, and teen pregnancy also. And because abortion is not legalized in Thailand, it shows how women don't own our body. If we become if a teenager becomes pregnant, then she has to take care of a baby, and, you know, the father is not in the picture as most cases. And then if you decide to abort that baby, you become inhumane. You only you only condemn these women, and we never teach them how to safely use protection. And we don't normalize this culture of sex education, which should be normalized. And we're still living in this sexist society with like a patriarchal teaching, even from a teacher who is a woman herself is teaching this, is imposing this culture, which is very shocking.
Thank you. So we're almost coming to the end. How many questions do I have? Oh gosh. Oh, no. We only have time for... Okay, can you all ask your questions and then let's see how we can navigate through the answers, but keep it short.
Hello. Yeah. Hi, my name is Pete, and I'm here out of personal interest. So I have two related questions. I'll try to make it short as possible. So first question, I want to talk about the role of tutorial school within the Thai education system. I don't think we touched upon that yet. So actually, I think it's becoming more and more prominent within Bangkok and also like provincial provinces. And I know, I think I know you go to international school, but my understanding is that there's been a pressure for students, international students, to prepare for A-levels or IGCSEs, and they also go to tutorial school of their own sort as well. So I wonder if you can shed light on that. And then another question I like to just direct to speakers who come from universities. So many years ago, I think the government decided that the admission criteria should include the GPA into the admission criteria, right? And then some departments decide that, we think that's not the best way to select students into that department, so they decide to run their own admission. And one of the effects on that, because I went through that experience, and one thing that is an unintended consequence is that you divide people in my class into two groups of people. There will be some who, believe it or not, who have books from tutorial schools, open under the drawer, under the desk, and trying to study while the teacher is teaching, because the grade don't matter to them, because they need to study the materials provided by tutorial school in order to get into these earlier admissions. And once they get in, then the schools don't matter anymore. It's just a matter of waiting until get accepted into the university. So just want to ask what you think about that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Could we get... I think you've already asked a question, so can we give somebody
I have
else?
one more question, if I may.
Can we give somebody...
It'll
you
be
got a
quick.
question from somebody else?
I have one more question from myself, if I may.
No, let's give some of the others a chance, if you don't mind, please.
You're violating my rights to speak right now.
No, I want to ensure everybody gets a chance.
Hi, I'm Shon from Destruct.
Come on, please.
I have one more question. So it's about the teacher reform. We talked about reforming the education system a lot already. So how should we reform the teachers? How should we make this occupation more attractive to people to actually want to become a teacher instead of, want to jump in a government official circle? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next
That
question.
wasn't painful, was it?
No, don't worry. But we've got to make sure everybody gets a fair chance. Go ahead, next question.
Hi, sorry. My name's Nat. I'm currently in university. I think in the same spirit as Pete, I just wanted to ask about what you think the role of international schools and private schools are in creating like an equal system of education, because I find that a lot of people who are able to afford to not go to public schools don't go, and I think it makes it a lot like personally, I feel very disconnected from like most of society because of it too. And I guess like in your opinion, should this privatization be encouraged or like discouraged? Yeah.
Okay, is this the final question?
Hello, I'm Sarah. I work for an international company here. My question is, we've seen a lot of protests in Hong Kong, and I guess there's the hashtag Milk Tea Alliance. So I want to understand more if it's important to have a role model and that kind of thing, or are you saying, no, it actually doesn't matter because social media is so transparent, so open that we can assess various inspirations? Thank you.
And is this the final? Go ahead.
I'm Ying, and I would like to ask, what do you think about the role of parents in teaching their children to be more democratically minded? And do you have any advice on how parents could go about doing that, creating a more democratic consciousness within the family and within their children? And also about parents' involvement in the schools and in the public education system.
Okay, thanks. So let's do it this way. the question on tutorial schools. Kuntida, could you handle that? On tutorial, I mean, the question was on students going for tutorials and how that fits into the education system. Could you field that question? Could one of you address the question on university admissions that was raised? Okay. On teacher and employment, who is comfortable to handle that question? Well, it has to be one of you again. Okay. And international schools, Angang, maybe you can field that question. And finally, each of you got a brief comment on the role of parents. And of course, the question on the Milk Tea Alliance. Yeah? Yeah, okay. So could you start with the tutorial?
Tutorial.
Make it quick, make it brief if you don't mind.
I'll be very quick. It comes from, I think it comes from this economic situation as well, where parents feel, and the students also feel the need that they have to be advanced. And the only track in Thailand that allows you to prove that you are going forward is the number. You don't have any other tracks. And that's why the tutorial schools become more and more important. I think the number, I mean, the cost, what is the word in English? Mulakha, the value of the tutorial industry is above 10,000 million baht in Thailand, above 10,000 ล้าน. It's quite a lot. And that shows, first, we don't trust the education system. We don't trust what's going on in the school. And of course, parents would buy the best future for their kids. Secondly, the testing system is way too much. So if you are university students, if you want to do all the tests, then that would be ONET. 9 วิชาสามัญ 9 subjects and get PAT, 3 sets of exam you have to go through. And that creates a lot of fear for parents and for the students, like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And that's why you turn to those tutorial school. For parents, I think Thai parents at the moment are facing a lot of peer pressure issues. And that comes from the fact that we keep comparing our kids to one another. It's quite common to talk about the grades and talk about which cram schools you go to. So that is the culture and the understanding that we need to bridge and fix. Shortly, briefly on parenting, I think democracy is way of life. So it's in your daily life. You listen to your kids. Do you respect them? Do you support them when they want to express themselves? Do you talk about responsibilities and duties with reasons? Do you discuss that with them? It should be made as natural as possible. In Thailand, democracy is only word, even in Thai school. It is word and ritual. It should not be made a ritual. Thank you.
On international schools?
So a brief comment on the question about international schools. I do very agree with that notion on how you were saying that it creates this divide, and I think a more important term to use, like detachment. I myself, as an international school student, before I read about politics here in Thailand, especially in Thailand, I would consider myself to be a very ignorant person. I didn't feel the need to care about what is happening around me because I live in my own confines. I am happy the way I am. And the problem with international school kids is that a lot of students who attend international schools here in Thailand, not all, but mostly are from parents who, from a privileged background. Their parents are higher middle income class or in the higher socioeconomic status, and therefore they do not feel the need to care about politics. About a couple of weeks ago, when I posted about the protesting, it was very shocking to me that one of the international school students messaged me and he said, "You know we're international school students, right? We don't really have to care about this." And this is the privilege to be apolitical. The privilege to be apolitical means that you may come from higher socioeconomic background and therefore you do not sympathize or relate with people in society, with the people in the middle class or the lower income class who are suffering. And the main reason for that is because of the society in which we live in. I think about half of my classmates, more or less, disagree with my opinions on social injustices, on social issues. However, I'm lucky that they still have something called human decency and respect for one another's opinion. But the bottom line for that is because we have to understand that a lot of families who send their kids to international schools are because they're from a higher socioeconomic class, and therefore it's this detachment. And lastly is because in school, we always teach students to be internationally minded. You see what is happening, China versus United States, the economic crisis here and there, what is happening in Yemen, the Uyghurs in China. But school never teaches us the issues here in Thailand because, again, as I mentioned, it is because of our community, of how we're from a privileged family. And these privileged families benefit directly from the injustices. A lot of the families, not all, benefit from the injustices that is currently happening in the society. And therefore, it is risky, it is dangerous, and it is not popular to teach about other society injustices in this school. And therefore, again, it creates this divide, this alienation and detachment.
Thank you. Ajahn Kovid, the question was on university admissions and the changing ground.
But since my name was mentioned more than anyone else today already, because I think that I shouldn't take too much time. So I beg my colleague to answer both questions.
Okay. And also the question on teachers and employment. Also, no, you can handle both, Pavita.
Teacher employment and university admission.
Shifting ground, yeah.
Shifting ground. On the university admission, the direct admission, university does it because the faculty feels that they want to attract people who really want to go to that faculty. So that's why they administer their own tests. That's what I understand. And because if you wait through the gap path, perhaps you don't get the student who express interest in that system directly. And so that's why it exists. On tutorial school, it's already covered. On teacher employability, I think first, honestly, is pay. I think we have to look at, and I would like to address from the university perspective. University pay are regulated by the Ministry of Finance because part of them are also the system that comes from the government system. University professor used to be considered as government officials. So the pay start at that level. I teach in the business school. When I joined with my master degree, the salary I got was less than the undergrad that I produced. So that's already one system that is not clear. And in the private system where a lot of my friends are now who graduate from the same university and work in the private sector, perhaps the difference would be about 10 times right now. So I think one of the real reasons to attract people more is to make the pay not to be equal, but to make it decent for people to make a living. Because university career used to be considered as something that is more for people who don't need to make a living, but now people do need to make a living as well. So I think first, the pay has to be reasonable. Second, I think the career path and the career advancement need to be perceived as a way as another profession, not as a work that we have to do as university duty. So I think that's something that I would like to say. Is that all?
Thanks.
On parenting, I'm still learning.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I just want to give the final word to Ang, who was our youngest speaker. The question was raised on the Milk Tea Alliance. This is this emerging solidarity between the protesters in Hong Kong, students in Thailand, Taiwan, Philippines. Share some brief thoughts and we can wrap it up.
My thoughts on the Milk Tea Alliance is that milk tea, such a cute name, boba milk tea. And actually, before I attended the protest, I posted on my Instagram story. And even before that, when I posted about the articles I've written, I've had several followers from Hong Kong who I didn't actually meet in real life with. We just had mutual friends, and they messaged me, and it was very kind of them. They sent me this whole PDF or Google Docs on how to handle or what to do if you get tear gassed. And he or she was like, I was a frontliner first aid at the Hong Kong protest, and I was very touched. And it's very amazing because it creates this idea of sympathy and understanding of what we are going through, on how all of these countries in the Milk Tea Alliance have this understanding of how our democracy is threatened, and that we are the new generations and our future is ours, and how we do not want to live in a society where democracy does not exist. And therefore, I think a bit on the role model that Sarah has asked, I think having a role model is nice, but with social media, I think it's not definitely necessary to have a single role model, because as you said, social media helps a lot. Me connecting with my fellow Hong Kong protesters, them giving me tips, it's actually very beneficial, and it unifies us in a sense, unifies youths in a sense of how we are all in this together, we're all fighting for democracy together, and it's the sharing of ideas.
Thank you very much. Please join me in thanking all our panelists. Ajahn Kovic, Ajahn Pavida, Kuntida, and Angang. Thank you very much, and please come to our program tomorrow, Friday. The Piano Man is here, and support the club by becoming a member. Thank you.